Hello and welcome to the Rusted Brush. Today, I'm going to be showing you how I painted up my vampire on zombie dragon for my undead army. Before getting into the model itself, I kind of want to talk about the overall direction I had in mind for this piece. With vampire counts, there's always a nice contrast between nobility and decay, and I really wanted to push that here. The vampire itself is meant to look almost pristine, regal, and powerful, while the dragon does the complete opposite, something ancient, rotting, and barely being held together. That contrast is what really makes these models stand out on the table, and it's something I want to keep in mind through the entire painting process. I'm using the newer Age of Sigmar version of this kit. I did change one part of the model, and that's the head. Instead, I used the Perry miniature men-at-arm close helmet with a plume from the Barrow Guard kit. I personally don't like bare heads when the rest of the model is fully armored, and I thought this helmet fit well. Just to expand on that a bit, the Perry miniature helmet fits surprisingly well scale-wise, and it gives the model a much more grounded, almost historical feel compared to more exaggerated fantasy heads. If you're doing something similar, I definitely recommend dry fitting first, because the scale can be slightly different depending on the kit. I also followed off the design on the shield so that I can freehand paint my own design on it. For the base, I'm using some Bretonnian bits I had laying around, and a mangled up man-at-arm. I'm not going to show you how I painted up these parts, as it's rather simple, just using mostly different browns and an enamel wash. So let's move on to painting. The wings, body, a bit of the base, the rider, shield, and reins were all separated so I could paint them easier. We're going to start by painting the vampire first. Before getting to the armor, I wanted to paint the cloth, and I wanted a nice regal look for this, so I went for Army Painter Bright Red Speed Paint. I then went over this with Wazdaka Red, and then gave it a matte varnish. I chose red here mainly because it immediately reads as royal and draws the eye, especially against the much paler tones of the dragon. It's a simple choice, but it works really well for creating that focal point on the rider. Now for the armor I used an airbrush. I don't have a good way of recording my airbrushing methods, so I airbrushed Vallejo Plate Silver and then used a lighter version afterwards to brighten it. I wanted the armor to look very regal and bright and be a nice contrast against the undead rotten zombie dragon. Now here I start painting any bits I wanted with gold with Vallejo True Metallic Metal Gold. Then I went into every crevice and depth with Dragonhof Nightshade to give the armor a bluish tint. I went with blue shade here instead of something like Melon Oil because I didn't want the armor to feel dirty or grimy, more cold and lifeless. It gives that slightly supernatural feel without losing the brightness. I then go back to brighten the armor up with Vallejo Plate Silver, leaving the blue in the recesses. Then I used Vallejo Sterling Silver as a final highlight of the armor. Off camera, I painted a freehand design on the shield, so here's the list of paints I used to paint this. I want to leave how I paint freehand for another video, and I feel like this would make this video a lot longer. Finally, I used AK NATO Rain Marks as an enamel wash for the entire vampire. I wipe away the excess with white spirits after it dries. This helps the model look a bit more aged and decrepit. I didn't want him to be rusted or heavily weathered, but this helps signify age and help him look like he belongs with the rest of the army. Alright, let's move on to the dragon now. With the airbrush, I started by using AK Vampiric Flesh, and then over top I used Purple Swarm Speed Paint, leaving the pale tones in certain areas for a more sickly look. After that, I used Ruddy Fur on any area with bones, and then dry brushed Ushabti Bone afterwards. I airbrushed Voluptuous Pink on the wing membranes, and where the skin had any wounds on it. I then painted the muscles and intestines with AK Ruby. Some of the organs I added a wash of Cassandora Yellow for a nastier looking tone. After this, I gave the model a matte varnish and started painting the skin with Vallejo Light Violet mixed with Purple Swarm and Ushabti Bone. And for the wings I did the same thing, but I made this mixture brighter with using some white into the same mix. Now for the fun part, I learned this technique from another YouTuber and I'll have a link to his video. Essentially, I painted superglue on the model with Loctite superglue. If you're going to try and do this, by the way, make sure that the model's dry and that you have good ventilation. Once it dried, I then airbrushed a thin layer of Sepia Sephirum and then a Drakenhof Nightshade. When it dried, I used 99% isopropyl alcohol to ruin bits of the shade to make a nastier corrupted vein effect. This part can take a bit of experimenting. If you remove too much, it looks a bit flat, and if you don't remove enough, it just looks like a wash. So I'd recommend testing it on something else first if you're unsure. I then applied another layer of glue and did the same thing with Bialtan Green Shade. Then I re-highlighted the bones with Ushabti Bone. And to last touch the skin, I paint all over it with Villainy ink Carrion Crimson, and I tried to pronounce this ink in the scratches and wounds of the area. I left the skin very glossy for a grosser, nastier, sickly look. Leaving that gloss finish really helps sell the effect. It makes these wounds and exposed areas feel wet and fresh compared to the rest of the model. Final touches were to add Yuhu glue to the mouth for some saliva, and then do the same thing but with blood for the blood god mixed with the glue. And that's the model finished. Overall, this was one of the projects where everything really came together at the end. The contrast between the clean, regal vampire and the absolute rotting, diseased dragon is exactly what I was going for. It really sells the idea that a kind of ancient noble clinging to power riding something that should have been dead long ago. The mix of airbrushing, enamel work, and those more experimental techniques like the superglue vein pushed this a bit further than I usually do, and I think it paid off. It's definitely a centerpiece model, and on the table it stands out immediately, especially with the brighter armor catching the eye against the darker, more corrupted tones of the dragon. If you want to try something similar, don't be afraid to experiment a bit, especially on undead models, where mistakes can actually add to the effect rather than ruin it. Next video I'm going to show my bandit warband for Mordheim and how I painted them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.